Donald Trump has humiliated the Democrats. That much is plain to see. But will Trump, and by extension his own supporters, be humiliated in the years to come? An article on Intelligencer by Ross Barkan explains this possibility. It says, "For Trump and MAGA, things will never be this good again." Now are the days of wine and roses for MAGA because Joe Biden is still president and Trump's reign remains hypothetical. On January 20, the script flips. The inflation and affordability crisis are Trump's problems. So is governing, which he has never excelled at. So this is something that's important to keep in mind. And it's something that's actually a problem for both parties. When a president-elect's reign is just hypothetical, when they're not in power yet, people have a fonder view of them. They're like, oh, wow, okay, they're going to come in and change things. We're finally going to get relief from Joe Biden. And when, before Joe Biden took office, it was, we're finally going to get relief from Donald Trump. So people always kind of are attracted to the idea of the candidate becoming president, but they aren't so much attracted to the candidate's policies once that candidate becomes president. They aren't so much fond of what the reality of this person being in office actually is like, how they actually govern. And sometimes, you have people going out there and being really vocal about the fact that they wish that they hadn't voted for that candidate, that they wish that they had voted for the other side maybe, or just stayed home. So that's going to be something that we can expect to see in the coming years. We saw it under Biden. We saw it under the first term of Trump. The question is, how big is that effect going to be? And this article explores that possibility a little bit more by talking about more policy. So while Trump's second term may promise, in theory, less chaos than his first, there isn't much evidence that his White House will evince the grim, rapacious discipline of the Bush-Cheney years when Republicans actually dominated all policymaking at home and abroad. There was no five-dimensional chess move in nominating Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. Trump could have saved himself much grief and put forth a far less scandalous loyalist in Pam Bondi, but opted against it because he ultimately can't help himself. That is so true. That is so true. He bit off more than he could chew. He got too greedy. He got too hungry. And he tried to throw a creepy guy who nobody likes into that position. Nobody except the most extreme people like Matt Gaetz. Pete Hegseth appears to be past the threshold for survival, and perhaps Kash Patel is a shot at the FBI. After all, but the trouble for Trump is that he is selected for subservience over any kind of greater reasoning or skill, and this will prove deleterious when these men are tasked with overseeing enormous federal bureaucracies. The same applies to RFK Jr., who has never managed much of anything. That's also true. But he has something cool for himself. He's got name recognition, so that's that. But yeah, are people really going to fall in love with these administration picks? There's an administration pick I'm thinking of from his first term, Betsy DeVos for Secretary of Education. And he never talked about appointing her on the campaign trail. He just sprung her up on Americans, and that's kind of normal. But people were like, oh my God, this woman is just a super wealthy plutocrat. She hates public schools. This is a disaster. And a lot of people were saying the thing they were looking forward to the most about Trump leaving office in 2020 was getting rid of Betsy DeVos. But now I don't really hear people talk about DeVos at all. But I remember at the time, she was despised. She was considered one of the worst Trump administration picks. One of the worst that actually stayed through, didn't get fired by him. So Trump's legislative agenda will be challenged immediately because despite MAGA's claim to the contrary, he did not win a historic landslide. Republicans barely control the House. Since Trump rarely thinks strategically, he has nominated not one but two Republican representatives, Elise Stefanik and Michael Waltz, to positions in his administration. Both will easily get confirmed and vacate their seats. In the interim, House Speaker Mike Johnson will be able to afford only a single defection on pivotal votes, a faction of far-right lawmakers, a faction ironically Johnson once belonged to, is very hungry to dump him despite not having a challenger with the support to actually become Speaker. The Democrats under Hakeem Jeffries, meanwhile, are unified and will not be aiding the fractious GOP. Okay, so that's true that the Democrats are unified behind Hakeem Jeffries, but we also have to point out the problem with the Democrats too. And this is where it's like, okay, how much will Trump really be humiliated? Because there has to be a forceful opposition. The Democrats are low-key kissing the ring of Trump right now. They are. And a former Republican even called that out. I talked about that in a previous video, that this is bordering on servility. Democrats like John Fetterman are like, I really look forward to working with Trump, and being almost completely silent on the issues where they disagree with him. It's like, what is going on here? You guys were up in arms the first time he got elected, and now when he ran on a much more ridiculous, much more outlandish, divisive platform and campaign, you're like, well, let's be nice. Let's play nice. We found a few needle in the haystack areas where we agree with him, so we're just going to talk about those all the time and pretend things are just pretty good. We have a few disagreements, but yeah, things are pretty good with us and the president-elect. Like, I look forward to working with him on this. This needs to stop. This needs to stop. So it's not a certainty that Trump and his supporters get humiliated in their upcoming term. They need an opposition to point out that what they're doing is ridiculous. Just like how the Democrats in 2006 under the Bush years wised up and said, okay, it's time to get serious about criticizing Bush, about standing against this guy and the Iraq War and his handling of it. And in 2006, there was a blue wave. It was massive. The Democrats even won a Senate seat in Missouri in 2006, Claire McCaskill. So, yeah, if Democrats actually are able to point out what the Republicans are doing, what Trump is doing, it can pay off. They got to do it fiercely. They got to do it aggressively. And it doesn't seem like they're getting ready to do that. It seems like they're getting ready to play patty cakes and find needle in the haystack areas where they agree. But I could be wrong. Maybe they'll wise up. In the Senate, life is only a little better for the Republicans. They have a majority of 53, far short of the 60 needed to override a filibuster, and at least 3 of those Republicans are explicitly skeptical of the Trump right. Susan Collins of Maine has a tough re-election fight in 2026 and will have every incentive to buck her party. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska has always hewed to the center, and John Curtis, the new senator from Utah, may end up a moderate in the mold of Mitt Romney. A 4th Republican, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, needs to survive in 2026 too, and if he's pitted against the popular former governor of his state, Roy Cooper, he will need to be careful about how closely he aligns with Trump. That's true, but Tom Tillis actually is a pretty tough guy. People thought he was going down in 2020, and yet he somehow survived a challenger. So I don't know how well things are going to go for the Democrats in the Senate in the midterms. I do know, I'm pretty certain that things are not going to go well for Trump's approval rating throughout his entire second term. He never went above 50% in his first term. His first term, which was far more mild than anything he's making his second term out to be. This was before January 6th. This was before a lot of his insane election denialism. He seemed like a much more moderate, by comparison, reasonable guy in 2017, 2018, 2019, even kind of 2020 than he did in 2024 and 2025. I mean, he's moved the Overton window so far to the right and in such a ridiculous direction. So, yeah, and not just his behavior, but his policies are almost certainly going to be unpopular. Think about the tariffs. Think about how expensive they're going to make everything. He will not fix the affordability crisis. People are probably going to expect some pretty immediate relief, actually. People probably hope that within a couple months, the prices are down under Trump. That's what they mostly elected him to help with. And when they see that, there's still an affordability problem, and it's, say, like November 2025, February 2026, things are still largely the same, then they're going to be mad. They're going to be like, why did I vote for this guy? Think about immigration, too. So much has been said about immigration. So much has been pointed out to be problematic about both illegal and excessive legal immigration. But will Americans really approve of mass deportation plans? Will mass deportation plans really help fix the affordability crisis? I tend to think not. And in fact, they'll harm the job market. They will. Americans will not be happy when they see some of their friends who they didn't even know were undocumented immigrants being deported, losing their friends, losing family members, families getting separated. They're not going to be fans of that. So, yeah, it will please the base. It will please the far-right base. But will that be enough to fight against the rising unpopularity that Trump will see during his second term? I don't think so. I think humiliation is on the way. It just depends on how well the Democrats stand up to him. I'll read a little more of this. To pass on any To pass any kind of legislation, Republicans will have to rely on the reconciliation maneuver that Democrats employed to engineer Biden's sweeping infrastructure, green energy, and manufacturing agenda. The Democrats had a smaller Senate majority, just 50-50, with Kamala Harris casting tie-breaking votes, but a more disciplined bloc in the House. Their primary struggle was wrangling the votes of a few rogue senators like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. For Republicans, counting votes will be far more daunting. Assuming no Democrat support, can Johnson unify his entire Republican conference around tax and spending bills that might alienate the furious fiscal conservatives? I don't know about that. I don't know. Isn't it crazy how history repeats itself too? John McCain was a huge thorn in Trump's side, and then Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema come along and do the same thing to the president of their political party. Finally, there's Trump himself, a 78-year-old who immediately upon his swearing in becomes a lame duck. He will be president into his 80s, forced to contend with approval ratings that will inevitably slide and majorities that, if history is any indication, will leak away. Democrats are already poised to retake the House in 2026. There are a few examples in recent American history of overly triumphant second terms, and J.D. Vance, the frontrunner for the 2028 nomination, will have to campaign as a de facto incumbent in an area that will continue to be unkind to anything that reeks of institutional entrenchment. The MAGAs are the man now, and that, in our uneasy time in which martyrs are made of assassins, is not the greatest place to be. That was a reference, I think, to Luigi Mangione. Once you're the person in power, you're expected to get things done. And if you don't get things done fast, I mean, you might face a backlash. You probably will. Approval rating-wise, midterm-wise, next election-wise for J.D. Vance, things could be bad. I think a lot of centrists are going to be really turned off by the Republican Party in the years to come. I think they might win over some people, but not more people than they lose. Not more people than they lose. It's going to be really embarrassing, both on foreign policy, where I think Trump will humiliate America on the world stage, but also on economics, where people will see prices are barely going down, if at all. They might even be rising. On top of that, people will lose their health care. They'll try to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Trump will try to push through his concepts of a plan. Remember his concepts of a plan, guys. They're so powerful. Those concepts are just amazing. You know, he's been fleshing them out so much. It's going to be ugly for them. And unfortunately, that does mean it'll also kind of be ugly for America, because America will be harmed. The economy will be harmed. The middle class will be harmed. But there will be a backlash. There will be a backlash. I don't want him to do damage to the country, but he's probably going to. And it's just a matter of people wising up to it. And people can wise up to it more easily if they have a Democratic Party that's good at rhetoric. And hopefully the Democrats will learn to get good at rhetoric, because the 2024 election showed that they aren't the best at it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. How badly will Trump and his supporters be humiliated? Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.